we haven't done this segment for a couple of weeks, and now that people have kind of started to get a little bit of their bearings down in their fantasy leagues and setting their lineups and seeing who's surprised, who has disappointed, going now into week 3, people are kind of keeping their eyes on everything fantasy football. So we have the Fantasy Football Insider once again with Scott. And Scott, you have some information that you'd like to share that could get some of us out of the hole. I personally am 1-1 in my league. Some frustrating players and performances, some really pleasantly surprising players on my own team. But what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the players doing well and doing poorly, and that's basically what I have this week. On our Cincy Jungle site, we have a lot of good posts that are done as far as waiver ads and picks. So I'm going to kind of look at it a little differently and kind of look at the approach of maybe more trade targets and kind of look at, now that we are 2 weeks into the season, we've seen some really highly regarded players who have failed to really live up to expectations, like Todd Gurley. And we've had a few players who have really overachieved much higher than they were expected to. You know, someone like the indomitable Willie Snead for the Saints. And then on the flip side, you have some guys who have really struggled to turn it around. Or you have guys who are just really, guys who are really, of the guys who are struggling, got my mind thinking, okay, so of the guys who are really struggling, sometimes they're going to turn it around. They have a slow start. And other times they just, they're in for a crap season. Like Andrew Luck last year is a good example of that. He started really rough, but people kept starting him. Nope, he's going to get it. And he just, the wheels fell off and he got hurt. And then you have other guys who you really didn't expect much from, and they emerge and have these great starts. And then the thing you have to try to figure out as well, are they going to come back to earth? Is it a fluke or is it legit? And a good example of that's Devonta Freeman last year. He was, many leagues wasn't drafted. He was supposed to be the backup. Tevin Coleman got hurt. Like, okay, he had a hot, game or two, and then he ends up, with like 1,500 rushing yards or something, some ridiculous number like that. So now that we're 2 weeks in, we've had guys who have done well, guys who have struggled. So what I'm trying to do is, with segment this week is, okay, let's look at these guys and see who seems to be legit. Are they sustainable? Are they guys who really seem like someone who's going to keep it up or not? And then if you're looking at possibly trading for people, you obviously want to buy low and sell high. So the idea is if someone started hot and you don't think they're going to sustain it, yet someone you'd try to want to trade away. And conversely, if someone started cold and you think they're going to improve, then you'd want to try to get them for the cheap. But of course, as probably anyone knows, trading in fantasy football is nearly impossible since everyone always loves their team more than the opponents. And for probably every 10 projected or proposed trade, you get one that goes through. And so it's a very difficult thing. Guy may be the worst guy in the world. As soon as he's on your team, he is a stud, future Hall of Famer, and you are not going to let him go without giving up the banks. Anyway, with that in mind, we have as on like running backs, receivers, and tight ends. So starting with running backs, some very interesting names in the top 5 this year. And I'll pair the first two together. D'Angelo Williams and Spencer Ware. They're currently number 1 and number 5. And so are they going to sustain it? And for them, I'm going to be Mr. Negative and go big fat no. And the reason is they are basically only as good as their starters are. So there's someone, if you're in a league with people who maybe aren't as familiar with fantasy and you're playing with, I don't know, relatives or cousins or people who have to ask you what the difference is between football and baseball, they might be good people to try to trade to them because they wouldn't realize that Le'Veon Bell's coming back in a week. And
that's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
And same with Jamal Charles. So yeah, those guys are ones I'm going to say I don't see us sustaining it. Another one, guy who's currently number 2 is Matt Forte. Before the season, he was kind of drafted 2nd, 3rd round because he was going to split with Bilal Powell, and now all of a sudden he's number 2. And for him, I'm also going to say no, just because he's a 31-year-old guy and he's on pace for 416 carries, which is, even back in the day, 416 carries is pretty unheard of, especially for someone that old.
That's a ton. Yeah.
And last few years, he's kind of on the way down. He got hurt a few games last year. He's been an under 4 yards per carry kind of a guy. I think he's going to be a decent producer. They've shown they're going to give him the volume, but yeah, I just don't see that number 2 rank sustaining. He's maybe a second running back, but yeah, definitely not that level. Next one, the guy at Bengals are playing, C.J. Anderson, currently ranked number 3, another guy who is kind of taken second, third round. And I'm actually going to say yes to him, only because he can run the ball, he can catch the ball. The defense is a very good defense, so the offense is going to get on the field quite a bit. He's never really been overused because he's been split. Now they have the new offensive system, and they want to run more, and they want to run with one guy, who I think he's going to be the guy. He tends to be a good yard per carry guy. I don't think he'll finish as like the number 3 guy, but I do think he'll end up as a very legitimate guy when it's all said and done. And then the last running back I wanted to mention was Melvin Gordon, another guy who was drafted high last year in the real draft. I think the Chargers traded up for him. Kind of had the abysmal year, no touchdowns, had some fumbles, kind of got in the doghouse. He's another one who I'm going to say yes. I think he's going to keep up. I don't think he's going to finish with the 24 touchdowns, which he's on pace for right now. But one thing to consider is the Chargers threw to Danny Woodhead over 100 times last year. And Woodhead's gone, so someone's going to pick up some of that. And it's obviously not going to be Keenan Allen.
They just signed Dexter McCluster.
Did they? So I'd say Gordon's going to get a uptick in production, probably more production than he's been getting, at least as far as targets or touches. So I think he's a very good candidate to keep up what he started.
Worth pointing out, third string Brandon Oliver also out for the year, I believe.
Is he? I know a couple years ago, I think he was a big Ryan Matthews and Donald Brown thief. Wide receivers, another one where the top 5 or 10 are filled with some very interesting names. Like I mentioned earlier, Willie Snead is number 2. Is he going to keep it up? I'm going to go with no, just because you look at the Saints, they're 0-2 this year. They have multiple targets. They have a Fleener who hasn't gotten really involved yet. Michael Thomas, the rookie from Ohio State. He's going to keep developing and get more targets. Brandon Cooks is obviously a top option there. So at the end of the day, I think he's on a good offense. They're going to throw a lot. He'll probably be a second receiver, but probably not worth he's not going to finish year number 2. He's not going to be up in the Julio Jones, Antonio Brown category. And then you look at number 3, Stefon Diggs, who kind of came out of nowhere, was a late round pick out of Maryland a year ago. After a couple weeks, he's just been phenomenal this year. I think he has like 250, 300 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Again, I'm going to say no. And I think there's a James Bond movie called Dr. No, who I might be emulating. But yeah, I'm just the no guy today. If you look at his first 4 weeks last year, he was on pace for 100 yards, I think 100 catches, 1,700 yards and 8 touchdowns. He finished the year with half of that. So he nowhere near his pace. This year, kind of the same thing. He's on that really hot pace to start the season, and he's in a worse situation this year. They're on their backup quarterback. They just lost their left tackle, Matt Khalil. They don't have Adrian Peterson, who's probably going to miss most, if not all, the year. So I think I just don't see him finishing as a top 3. Next guy I do see doing well, which is Larry Fitzgerald, who's currently number 4. I know a lot of people kept expecting, Malcolm Floyd, John Brown, they're going to bring the younger guys in. They're going to kind of phase them out. But last year, they moved him to that new position. They changed his role in the offense, and he had a huge season. And this year, he's kind of picked up where he left off. So he's someone I think that, he's probably legit, who's going to be a top, 10, 20 running or receiver, someone closer to where he's kind of at right now. The next 2 I'll kind of pair together, the last 2 receivers, Mike Wallace and Corey Coleman. I'm going to say hell no on them. Mike Wallace has 3 touchdowns on 7 catches. That's just totally unsustainable. Someone's going to add him on as a waiver. Someone's going to try to trade for him. If you have him and someone wants him, by all means, see whatever you can get for him, because that he may only end up the year with 3 touchdowns. Corey Coleman just hurt his hand. Cleveland's on their 3rd quarterback, and he's averaging a ridiculous 25 yards per catch. So unless you think Cody Kessler is the next Tom Brady and you can catch with one hand. I know Odell Beckham showed you can catch with one hand. I'm going to say Coleman and Wallace are definitely 2 not to consider. And then tight ends. I have 2 tight ends, and I'm just going to say right now they're a big fat no. One is Vance McDonald. He has 2 touchdowns on 3 catches this year. And I think he had a 75-yarder and another one that if you go back far enough in Bengals history, they had a backup tight end. I think it was Matt Schobel, who had a fluke end of a game, 70, 80-yard touchdown catch. So he ended the game with like 14 points. The very next week, in every league, he was scooped up like, wow, his tight end got 14 points. This is amazing. I think it was the only touchdown all season. So you kind of have to look at their situation, and that's kind of what the next two guys who have paired together, which is Jack Doyle and Dwayne Allen. Two top 10 tight ends right now. Andrew Luck has 5 touchdown passes, and only 1 is going to a wide receiver. So they're kind of benefiting from that. Obviously, that isn't going to continue. And they both just have a very ridiculous touchdown to reception rate. And if you look at when Gronkowski had his 17 touchdown year back in 2011, he had 19% of his catches went for touchdowns. Right now, Doyle and Alexander have a higher rate. So you can argue it's not a very sustainable number. So if someone's trying to trade you them, I'd definitely pass. I think they could be decent, but not where they're currently playing at. So I guess for this week, that's the big thing I'd look at is just recommend if you're looking at trades, kind of look at guys who are starting hot, starting cold, and try to ask yourself, based on their situation, which ones do you think are going to continue and which ones do you think are going to flop? And then obviously you want to try to get the guys who you think are poised to turned around, and you want to try to unload the guys who you think might be a flash in the pan before they fizzle out.
Okay, so Scott, real quick, you threw a lot.
Yep.
You threw a lot at us, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And it is a bit of a selfish question on my part, both because I have both guys on my team, but one player is a Bengals player. Just kind of a quick response. Be patient or impatient with Titans running back Derrick Henry and Bengals running back Jeremy Hill.
I'd say Hill I'd be patient with because there's no trade value right now.
And he's more of a goal line guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're just not going to get anything for him because he has like 20 carries for 50-some yards, and he does have the 1 touchdown. The one nice thing with Hill is they played 2 very difficult teams to run against. The Bengals always struggle running against Pittsburgh. The Jets have the insane front 4, and once they get through Denver, they're kind of through the roughest part as far as opposing teams to run against. And
all kind of those diverse defenses that they bring looks up front,
Yeah, so he's one openings up too.
So he's definitely someone I'd hold on to because he has no trade value and he can only improve, and I think he will improve. One nice thing is he has receiving yards this year. They kind of showed it in preseason and so far this year. They're willing to throw to him this year, and so I think he can give you a little more than he did last year as far as usage once they can get this whole offensive running thing figured out. And the other guy you mentioned was Derrick Henry. He's someone that's interesting, I think. If you look at him and DeMarco Murray, Henry's really starting to eat into DeMarco Murray's touches, and I think by the end of the year they could probably be a 50-50, or he might even replace him because they've been using Murray a lot to catch the ball. So I don't know if they would even get to a point where Henry replaces him as far as number of rushes or being the main guy. But he's definitely someone I'd say for now I'd probably hold on to and maybe watch, especially with Murray having something of a high usage injury history that you never know when he's going out.
Yep. Okay. Well, good stuff, Scott. Appreciate it. That's the Fantasy Football Insider with Scott Schulze, a pretty frequent segment that we have here on the Orange and Black Insider. If you have questions for Scott, do you have a Twitter handle that people can ask you, or email, or in case they have some fantasy questions?
I'm very old-fashioned. I still have the phone with the rotary dial.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, you know what? If you do have if you do have fantasy questions, let's do it this way then. If you do have fantasy questions for Scott Schulze, you can tweet us at Bengals OBI, email us at theorangeandblackinsider@gmail.com, leave the comments in iTunes, and those that could be more ammunition for you as this segment goes forward, Scott. But good stuff.
Yeah, and we've been very happy to answer questions in future episodes of our podcast.
Yep.